Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening for another Restless event with our partners, My Menopause Centre. And this evening, we are looking at how to kickstart good habits to power up your menopause. So just a few things to remind you of before I hand over to Helen, who'll chair this evening's event. Please post your questions and your thoughts in the chat function at the bottom of your screens, and feel free to post throughout the presentation. There'll also be time for questions at the end. So the event will run for 1 hour, and it is being recorded and mailed to everyone who's registered for it. So I'll hand over now to panel chair and co-founder of My Menopause Centre, Helen Normoyle. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you. Thank you, Aidan, and good evening, everyone. We're delighted that you're joining us for our webinar this evening, How to Kickstart Good Habits to Power Up Your Menopause. So we've all been there, haven't we? We start the new year with a long list of well-intended resolutions, and today's what, the 21st? How many have we ditched already because they're just too ambitious or too boring? But this time of year really is an amazing opportunity to make meaningful changes that can improve our overall well-being. And that's so vital when we're going through the menopause. But the secret is, of course, to take a realistic and sustainable approach. We'd love to be here 10 months from now, still practicing these habits that we're going to form. And that's what we're going to discuss this evening. We have 3 fantastic panelists who are going to help you with this. We've got my co-founder and friend, Dr. Clare Spencer. Dr. Clare qualified from Cambridge University, and she holds membership of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and membership of the Royal College of General Practitioners. She's also a member of the British Menopause Society Medical Advisory Committee and a BMS trainer. There isn't anything that Clare doesn't know about menopause, and she is just so fantastic at providing help, advice, support, and compassion to everyone on our webinars and, of course, all our patients. I'm delighted that we're joined this evening by fitness guru Kate Rowe-Ham. Kate is, of course, the author of Owning Your Menopause, Fitter, Calmer, Stronger in 30 Days, and the founder of the Owning Your Menopause app. She's passionate, as you hear tonight, about educating women on how to exercise and nourish their bodies in midlife. And she wants to help them see the benefit of movement and diet and how they both go hand in hand in playing a fundamental role in managing many of the symptoms associated with the menopause. And we've also got the nutrition expert, the brilliant Clare Grace, joining us. Now, it will be slightly confusing with Clare and Dr. Clare, but that's how I'm going to make the distinction. Clare is a registered dietitian and nutritionist with over 30 years of experience, and she's the founder of Second Spring Nutrition. Clare specializes in weight management and diabetes remission, and she brings a wealth of expertise in how nutrition can affect our health during the menopause transition. Clare offers practical, evidence-based approaches that really make a difference, and over the years, she's guided thousands of women in transforming their eating habits and overall health by blending proven nutrition strategies, and that's key, with an understanding of the psychology of eating. Now, as Aideen said, pop your questions in the chat, but as ever, we can't provide individual medical advice, but we can and will, of course, answer questions at a more general level. So, Dr. Clare, we're going to kick off with a question for you. If you could just give us an overview of how the menopause impacts our overall well-being.
Yes, hi, good evening, everybody. So menopause can affect well-being in so many ways. So first of all, wellness or our well-being can be impacted by our experience of all of the symptoms of the menopause related to that fluctuation and loss of estrogen. So from hot flushes and night sweats to aches and pains and bladder urgency. And then we really need to consider also the long-term health consequences of the menopause. So increased risk of heart disease, cardiovascular disease, which overtakes that of men's as we transition through the menopause, and then osteoporosis, so bone health. Osteoporosis being that long-term condition where we lose bone density, our bones become slightly more fragile and more prone to fracture. So we've got symptoms on one hand, psychological, physical, and then we've got those long-term health consequences of the menopause.
Brilliant. Thank you for that overview, Claire. And already Lisa's come in with a question that we wanted to start with, because you get this so often in the clinic, and I'd love to hear from Kate and Claire as well to see if they get this a lot, where as you go through menopause, you find that you haven't changed your eating habits, you haven't changed exercise, but weight is creeping up with you, and particularly weight around the middle. So great question, Lisa, and a cracker to start off with. Claire, what's behind that? Why does that very unfairly happen to us in midlife as we go through the menopause?
So shall I start and then we'll hand over? Yeah, okay. So as you go through the menopause, there are a number of significant changes. It's rarely just one factor that means that you're more prone to put weight on and making it more challenging to lose weight. So if we think what's happening from a hormonal point of view, so as we lose estrogen, we can start to develop something called insulin resistance, which I know Claire will talk about more later, but that basically means that the way our body handles carbohydrates changes. So we're much more likely to redistribute fat round our middle, and then that makes that situation worse. We're more likely to lose muscle mass. So if we did nothing, I know Kate hopefully is going to talk about this a little bit more, but we start to lose muscle mass, and that means that our metabolic rate starts to decrease, which means that we don't burn as many calories in our normal resting state. And then if we think about the psychological symptoms of the menopause, so with that fluctuation and loss of estrogen, we can start, our mood can just dip a bit lower, our anxiety can spike a little bit higher, and we can lose motivation. So the get up and go, many women will tell me they've lost their mojo, and they're finding it really hard to motivate themselves to make healthy choices and to get out and exercise. And again, with those psychological symptoms and feelings of stress, you may be more likely to reach for dopamine inducing or immediately rewarding types of food, like sugary things that make you feel better at that moment in time, but are empty calories. So many factors that really impact. And if we did nothing through the menopause transition, if you didn't change anything, then we know that weight can creep on. So that would be my medical viewpoint. Kate, shall I hand over to you next? Interested to know how you approach this issue, because it is such a common issue, isn't it? So many women will say to me that they just can't lose that weight.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm really honoured to be here, and I think it's a great topic, January. And I know, as Helen said, a lot of you might have sort of kick-started the new year and you're already feeling at a push. To that point, I think it is, you pointed out, obviously, we have all of those symptoms which can make movement difficult. I've written down a few things when you were talking. You know, I think it's important to remember we also, at this stage of life, have so much to juggle. We often are caring for elderly or sick parents. We've got teens doing exams. And I think we often put ourselves at the very bottom of the pile. So we cater for everybody's needs. So not only are we juggling that myriad of symptoms that you've already talked about, that can cause, you know, low mood, lack of sleep, those aches and pains that can kind of like hinder movement. We are also fighting, sadly, as our hormones decline. It's kind of like this hot pot of everything, hormones declining, dealing with life struggles. And I saw that in the chat, actually, which was a really great question, which was that, you know, if you are doing all the right things. So I know we talked about, you know, if you're not, and the symptoms can prevent you, but that's one of the most common questions I get. So it was a great one to ask. And I think I can answer that, and hopefully this will resonate with a lot of people as well. And it said, if you didn't see the chat, that this person exercises a lot and can't lose the weight. And this is a really common thing from a lot of women. And I think, as you pointed out, you know, what we did in our 20s or our 30s no longer kind of works in our 40s, 50s, 60s, postmenopausally. So it's really important to look at the movement that you're doing. And I'll get this, and people will say, I'm exercising every day, you know, and I can't lose the weight. And that is your answer. Your body, you know, as you're going through this life-changing transition, needs the rest and it needs to be looked after just as much as it needs to exercise. You know, estrogen is an anti-inflammatory. If you're exercising, you know, every single day, you're possibly putting it under some undue stress. Your cortisol levels will rise, and again, that sort of plays into that that inflammation. And as we know, cortisol is good, but too much cortisol can also lead to a little bit of it can lead to weight gain as well. So I would say, you know, exercising a lot could be one of the reasons that you're finding yourself plateauing or not losing weight. And another thing is, what kind of exercise are you doing? So if you are finding that, you know, you were doing loads of HIIT, so that's the high intensity interval workouts, which are great when you're so pushed for time, they're not so great when you've got an aching body that perhaps needs you to just to go, okay, 1 or 2 hits a week is great, but let's look at weight training. You know, Claire's already mentioned about our bone density and bone loss and muscle loss, and the benefits of weight training for women in menopause when it comes to not only losing weight and maintaining weight, but again, you know, with the bone density and the muscle mass are infinite. And I would say that, you know, for anyone that is finding themselves in that situation, to really, really look at how you're exercising, how you're moving your body. Are you actually getting enough rest? Because again, not to make it too technical, you know, when our body is resting, that's when it's building. So it's able to build that lean muscle mass that we talk about. And that probably almost needs nicely onto that nutritional piece, because actually, whilst exercise is so fundamental, I do see as well, and Claire down the bottom, other Claire, not Dr. Claire, nutritionist Claire, you know, a lot of the women I work with tend to revert to the under eating as well. So they're over exercising, they're under eating, and they are restricting and, you know, taking away such fundamental macronutrients from their diet.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry,
Sorry,
go on, Claire.
No, I was just going to follow on from what Kate said there. So hello, everyone. Lovely to be here. Yeah, I would completely agree. I think that, you know, the activity and the food side of things go absolutely hand in hand. And from the nutrition point of view, just as your exercise or your activity needs change as you're going through menopause, so do your nutrition needs. So there are specific elements of nutrition that we really need to focus on. But it's also, you know, as Dr. Clare was saying, you know, as we start to go through menopause, our bodies are not processing food in the same way as they were when we were younger. So we don't process sugary foods and refined starches as well. And so that leads to kind of peaks and dips in our blood sugar. And we think that those dips are what is linked in with increased hunger, physical hunger, and increased food cravings. And it's not uncommon, and I'm sure there'll be lots of people listening where you've noticed that there is this increase in hunger and cravings, and I think that and how you manage that as part of the process is really important. And I think one of the other things, you know, we've mentioned stress, but it's also the aspect of sleep that is really important. You know, we know poor sleep is something that many of us struggle with, and there is a very close connection between poor sleep and difficulty sleeping and people struggling with weight, for all sorts of reasons, but partly because when we don't sleep well, our hunger hormones increase. So if you've had a bad night's sleep and you wake up the next day and you're feeling physically hungry, or you're making different food choices, then it's linked in with the sleep. So they're very connected. And I think, you know, and I think that the really important point to say with all of this is that none of it is your fault. If you are struggling to manage weight, you've just heard from us a few of the reasons why that might be. And I think that's incredibly important to recognize that all of this is going on, and, you know, it is not our fault. There are very clear reasons why this can happen. But there's also a lot that we can do to make a difference. And I think we'll go on and talk about that.
Can I just ask a quick question maybe to Claire and Kate, because you both mentioned it and it's come up in the chat as some questions. So I'll start with you, Kate. One of the questions was how much is a good amount of rest? And I think links to your point there, is sleeping part of the rest that you would consider as well, or is there non-sleeping rest that we should be doing as well? Sorry, Kate, you're on
Yeah,
mute.
sorry, I saw that. Yeah, I was looking at that chat as well. So I think you know, one of the important things is we can tie it in as well, because I know someone said, you know, if they're feeling really tired and unmotivated, how do they start and how do they find you know, the energy to exercise? And I guess that then plays into that rest. I do find it, and I don't know about you guys, I do find one of the things really difficult when people say, you know, you need to have this amount of sleep. And I think that can be really off-putting sometimes, because then that plays more into your anxiety when you're lying there and you're like, okay, have I had enough sleep? Am I meant to sleep? I think one thing that's really good that I learned from a lovely sleep expert called Catherine Pinkman is we often do sleep more than we think we have as well. You know, you wake up in the morning and you are dog tired, but there's a chance you've had more sleep than you think. But obviously, if you aren't having enough, as has been pointed out, you'll make bad food choices. You won't want to move your body. So in terms of what is enough rest, I would say if you are feeling very, very fatigued every morning when you wake up, the likelihood is you're not getting enough sleep. But to start to try to build healthy habits and patterns around that, because once you get yourself into a routine, your body will start to rest better. And I see so many women who and I know there have been questions about joint pain as well. And I think this kind of comes into it, that when we feel we're tired, or when we feel we've got joint pain, or when we feel we've got a low mood, granted, perhaps lying on the sofa and pulling a duvet over your head and, you know, watching Netflix might feel like the thing that's going to serve you best, but it's not. Motion is lotion. So for joint pain, obviously, unless you've been diagnosed with anything more sinister, can be so beneficial to help get the joints moving, get the muscles moving, and alleviate so much joint aches and pains. And again, in terms of your fatigue and you know, that sleepiness, exercise will really help you get a better night's sleep. And then hopefully it just has that knock-on effect. And then again, in terms of that exercise piece, I would be looking to have 2 rest days a week within your exercise routine, and that can be active rest. So I'm not talking about sitting still. Go out for a walk. And I always say to people, if there's one thing you can do, try and get 5,000 steps in a day, regardless. I know 10,000 is the holy grail, but again, it's just placing unrealistic expectations on yourself.
Brilliant, thank you. I love that. Motion is lotion. I haven't heard that one before. It'll make its way into the social post, Kate. Claire, any thoughts from you around, you know, in getting a good night's rest? You know, should we stop eating an hour or two before we go to? Are there things that we can do from a nutrition point of view? And Dr. Clare, I'll come to you too, because I know you've done a huge amount of work in sleep and have lots of great sleep advice. But Claire, starting with you, any things that we can do, you know, from a dietary perspective or a nutrition perspective or eating habits to improve our sleep and sleep quality?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing that you just alluded to then, which is the sort of meal timing part of it, you know, I think, you know, if we are eating meals very close to bedtime, then I think for some people that can have an impact. So there's no magic number as to how many hours before you go to bed, but, you know, I think it's playing with that and seeing if actually if you bring your evening meal time, you know, earlier in the day, does that help you sleep better? And I think, you know, the sorts of food changes that we're going to go on and talk about are the ones that will, you know, help people in terms of sleep. There's no specific foods per se that are linked in with improved sleep. It's just a general healthy diet, really. Certainly when people do start to lose weight, they often find that their sleep improves. It's a bit of a kind of chicken and egg, what comes first, and you know, if you improve one, the other will improve. So yeah, I would say just a general healthy diet, really, and then looking at meal timings.
Brilliant. And I'm going to come back to you in a moment on what do you mean by healthy diet, so we can spell it out to everyone and be really clear, because I know you've got some great advice on that. But Dr. Clare, your top tips, you know, for getting a good night's sleep.
Yes, very briefly, in a nutshell, look at your nighttime routine. Avoid too much screen stimulation, bright light before you go to bed, because there are small bits of evidence suggesting that it affects the melatonin, the amount of melatonin, which is a hormone that keeps you asleep. I think the greatest thing is I speak to so many women who wake up at between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. and then they're lying in bed, worrying, anxious about the next day, ruminating. And I think my big one, top tip for this evening is if you find yourself lying there for more than 15-ish minutes, then get up and do something. Don't look at your phone. Don't look at your emails. Don't think I can just squeeze a bit of extra work in. Do not look at your phone if you can avoid it. Go, get up, have a chamomile tea or decaffeinated drink, and then go back to bed when you're feeling a little bit tired. Everybody will have their different routines. I like listening to something if I wake up in the middle of the night. That works for me. But try to avoid lying in bed awake in the middle of the night at that awful time between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m.
Yeah, no, really great advice, Dr. Clare. And Kate, there's a really great question in here as well. When it comes to, you know, getting a really good sleep routine, is it better to exercise in the morning or evening?
I hate this question because it's any movement is great movement at whatever time of day you can do it, and I think that's one of the reasons why you know, some people fall off of their New Year's resolutions or whatever these routines they put in. Because I think it's worth mentioning, you know, I know it wasn't necessarily coming up, but you know, we have so much social media that we are fed, and especially around you know, exercise and diet. I think so many of us don't know what we're supposed to do, and everything's been taken out of our hands. And so, you know, should I exercise in the morning? Should I work out with an empty stomach? You know, I get asked all these questions all the time. What works for me won't work for you. What works for somebody else won't work for somebody else. This whole journey, and you know, which can be a really positive journey, I think, is the one thing to say now. I know that some of you here might be, you know, at the lowest of the low and totally feeling unmotivated and aches and pains, but that was me 5 years ago, and I never thought I'd be sitting here now sharing this story. So I want you to know that it can get better. But it's your own journey, and it's making your toolkit with the things that you take from us today that can really help you thrive. So any exercise is good exercise whenever you can fit it in. And if that's 10 minutes at different times of the day, take those 10 minutes and do it. And I think the other thing for those that might still have young kids, I have an array of kids from old to young, exercising, moving your body is never selfish. And I think sometimes we think if we're putting someone in front of the television, or we're not interacting with somebody that needs our attention because we want to go and do a workout or some exercise, do it. It's not selfish. It's the biggest gift you can give to yourself. So you know, don't worry about everything that's going on social media. Do what works for you.
Brilliant advice. Thank you. And we're going to come back to motivation to you, Kate, in just a moment. But Clare, Dr. Clare, a question for you, because it's come up in the chat, but we've alluded to it. Claire's alluded to it, Kate has too. Joint aches and pains can sometimes be a barrier to people doing exercise in particular. So what advice would you give to someone who's on the call tonight who is suffering from joint aches and pains? What things that can they do to help themselves so that exercise becomes easier for them?
Yeah, so the first thing is, why are you having aches and pains? So it may be that you need to go and have a chat with your GP and rule out causes. So for example, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, maybe it's a lingering injury. If you're getting generalized mild to moderate aches and pains that come on with your menopause symptoms, that makes it more likely that they are related to the menopause. But I'm always really nervous about putting everything down to the menopause, so please get checked out. And then what's going to help will be really dependent on you, as we've all sort of touched on. It may be that physiotherapy is going to be helpful. It may be that looking at different forms of exercise, such as yoga or Pilates versus running, are going to be helpful. I think it's really working with your, but it sounds like a cliche, but you really do need to sort of work with your body and work out what you can do rather than focusing on what you can't do. And in terms of medical help, you know, there are anti-inflammatories if you don't have any contraindications, again, to talk about with your doctor. If your aches and pains are related to the menopause, then hormone replacement therapy can sometimes, not always, help. So look at different strategies. It may be that you need to talk to a doctor to do that, to work out the right way to help alleviate your aches and pains. Don't just put up with it. Do something.
Yeah, That's brilliant, Claire, and that's the key thing, isn't it? There are solutions out there. It's really important to find a solution, because that will make the other things easier for you to do as well. So Kate, one of the questions that's come up, and again, we've all kind of touched on it, is how do you get motivated to do exercise and to make those changes?
Yeah, it's really hard, and I think something that you know, when you work in this field, and obviously I'm a trainer, I'm really mindful of the way I answer that question, because I built a routine and a habit. So for me, it's a natural thing. I think you have to think about where you are and what you are feeling. And I know that a lot of people focus on the weight side of things, but I think realistically, if we look at the benefits of exercise and think about heart health and bone health and joint health and all of the things it's going to do, and it builds motivation, that creates a sustainable and achievable relationship with moving your body, which can really, really help with that motivation. But I think your first step has to be finding your why, and like only you can find that, and that's the hardest thing. Like, we can give you all the motivation you need here today, but it's your one day or day one. And my why, if I look at it, and if it helps anybody, is I want to be able to get on and off the loo on my own independently for as long as possible. I have seen how fragile one of my parents, who's very sadly no longer here, became through lack of exercise and various age-related diseases. And I don't want that to be me. So I think whilst, you know, we talk about menopause and we focus all those things, this is a section in your life. We're living longer. And how do you want that next 30 years to look? What do you want to be doing when you're 75, 80? You know, if you've got children, and then you might be fortunate enough at some time to have grandchildren, you know, what does that look like? So that is my driver. And being totally honest, you know, my goal, when I was younger, everything was always an aesthetic goal. I think it is for so many of us. And I really had to change that narrative to, like, what you look like on the outside is not representative of what's going on the inside. So I think just, you know, really having a word with yourself, and what does that look like? That might mean, for someone who is literally baseline, going out for a walk for 5 minutes a day for 1 week. That's all it needs to be. And you might slowly feel like the vitamin D being outside just gives you a little bit of a boost. And then week 2, you go, okay, do you know what? I can do this. I'm going to do 10 minutes every day. And it's just slowly and gradually building up. This is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And I think knowing that you are going to feel better in 4 to 5 months is the best way of looking at it. It's not going to be overnight. And again, I think that's sadly where we all fall off the wagon. I'm not going to say fail, because I don't think we ever fail. I think it's just we sometimes don't set ourselves up for success. But don't think about what you look like. Note down, how do I feel? Is my mood better? Am I sleeping better? Am I able to eat better and make better choices because I've got more energy? You know, am I more motivated? Am I being kinder to people because I'm not so grumpy? Because I've had that 10-minute walk. And note those things down. Hopefully, you know, that just really builds that sense of motivation. I think don't look for motivation first off. I think build, you know, commit and consistency, and motivation will come.
Oh, look, brilliant advice, Kate. And I've got some more questions on exercise I'll come to in a moment. But first, I'd love to draw on Claire, because we've had some questions about nutrition, Claire. And I know you've got some brilliant advice that you want to share tonight. So what are your healthy eating recommendations, and in particular for women going through the menopause transition?
Yeah, so I think, you know, like we said at the beginning, you know, our nutrition needs change as we're going through this time. And there's 3 groups of foods that I wanted to sort of highlight to people, really, where we need to be thinking about adding more of them or checking that we've got enough. So the first of those groups is more plant foods. And plants contain all sorts of fantastic nutrients, but probably the one that I would flag up as being the most important is fiber. And that's for 2 reasons, really. The first is that probably 90% of us don't eat anywhere near enough fiber. And the second point is that fiber during menopause can do so much for us. You know, we mentioned before about our blood sugars peaking and then dropping. what high fiber foods can do for us is they can help us to have a more steady blood sugar, so that we can manage our physical hunger better. If you've been told your cholesterol level is raised, so thinking about heart health, then fiber will help to pull your cholesterol level down. And of course, fiber is really important in terms of gut health. Hear all about, gut health is linked in with probably every single thing in the body these days, but our gut health is really important, and what our gut bacteria love more than anything is fiber, and lots of different types of fiber. So, and also from a weight point of view, fiber helps you manage appetite and manage hunger. So it's definitely our friend. And when we're thinking about, well, where do we get plants from? The obvious thing that everybody would say would be vegetables and fruit. And I'm sure everyone's heard of the 5 portions of fruit and veg a day, which is a great starting point. I think if anyone's got there and they want to optimize even more, you can go to kind of 7 portions a day if you want to. Thinking about your plate, that's around half of your plate filled with veg. So it's not just more quantity of vegetables and fruits that we want, it's also more variety. So what we want is all those different colors, because it's the color pigments that the bacteria in our guts love. So you'll have heard probably of the Eat the Rainbow. So lots of different colors and varieties in there. Another plant food that people might not necessarily think of as a plant is nuts. So, and I don't mean the kind of salted, roasted, covered in honey versions, as delicious as they are. It's the raw, unprocessed nuts. And a small handful of nuts every day, which is about 30 grams, can be particularly beneficial if you are concerned about heart disease and if you've been told that your cholesterol level is high. So including 1 portion of nuts a day is helpful. Along the same lines is seeds. So we often don't think much about seeds, but things like chia seeds, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, they're little powerhouses of nutrition. And, including those where we can, sprinkling them on yogurt, putting them in salads, wherever we want to use them, really helpful. If you are thinking, I'm not eating much fiber and maybe I should eat a bit more, just take it slow and steady, because our digestive system takes a bit of a while to kind of adjust to it. So don't whack in a load all at once, but gradually increase. Don't forget about herbs and spices, because they are brilliant. They contain lots of these plant chemicals that are really beneficial. So use those wherever you can. And then whole grains. So when you're choosing rice and pasta and bread, try and choose the brown versions, the whole grain versions. So the brown rice or the whole wheat pasta or the pea pastas that are coming out. And I saw someone earlier had said, should we be eating less carbohydrate foods? Actually, the most important thing to do is to look at the quality of those carbohydrates. So to first of all look at, can I choose the high fiber versions, because they will keep your blood sugars steady. If you're thinking about quantities, it's very variable, but around about 1/4 of your plate with whole grains. So definitely more plant foods. And then the second group is about lean proteins. So making sure, Kate's talked about the importance of activity and exercise and about the links with nutrition. And I think, we need to make sure that we're getting enough protein to support that muscle growth. Lots of us will get enough, but some of us might not do. So it's just making sure, have I got a protein source at each meal? Have I got, say, Greek yogurt or eggs or something at breakfast? Have I got lean meat or chicken or fish at the other meals? Or plant alternatives, so things like pulses or tofu products like, soy products like tofu or tempeh. And actually, if you are struggling with heart disease or you're struggling to manage weight, then thinking about 1 or 2 meatless meals a week can be really helpful to kind of manage both of those things. And then one other thing I should just flag up is about oily fish. So oily fish contains something called omega-3 fats, which will help in terms of heart disease. They're also thought to be helpful in terms of joint health. So 1 portion of oily fish a week can be really important. And then the final group in terms of eating more of is high calcium foods. You know, we've talked about bone health. So making sure that we're getting 3 portions of high calcium foods. The easiest place to get high calcium foods from is from dairy or from non-dairy fortified alternatives, you know, things like soy milk. But there are other high calcium foods. So if you look on the Royal Osteoporosis Society website, they've got a really nice list of high calcium foods. And they've also got a calcium calculator, so you can calculate whether or not you're getting enough calcium in your diet, it takes 2 minutes, and it's quite a useful thing to do. And then going alongside the calcium, we need to make sure we're taking vitamin D. So between September and April, 400 international units or 10 micrograms of vitamin D a day. So those would be my foods where you eat more of. And then the 2 foods I just wanted to quickly flag up in terms of thinking about, are they getting in your way? Are they actually making your symptoms worse? Are they stopping you reaching your health goals? And the first one would be alcohol. We know that, you know, alcohol, as we get older, we process it less well, you know, it affects us quicker and it takes us longer to get over it. And I think we also know it affects us in terms of sleep, so it'll affect our deep sleep. It's not great if you're struggling with low mood or anxiety, and it will definitely get in the way of managing weight. So it's not to say we have to go teetotal at all, but it's just thinking, is this something, if I tweaked it a bit, it might help me? And then the last one that I just wanted to flag up was about sugary foods. And we all know that probably many of us are eating a lot of sugar and it's maybe not helping. When we look at where we get that from, most of our sugar comes from snack foods. It comes from things like cakes and biscuits and ice cream and things like that. And most of us will buy those foods in the supermarket, and they will fall into this category of ultra-processed foods, which I'm sure lots of people have been seeing all the stuff that's in the press about ultra-processed foods. We don't want to demonize these foods, and we don't want people to think they can't have them, because they can. But it's, you know, the more we learn about ultra-processed foods, the more we can see that one of the things they're definitely doing is people find it very difficult to stop eating them once they start. So it's that classic thing of, why have I just eaten half a packet of biscuits when I only intended to eat 1? And we know that a lot of these foods have a combination of fat and sugar in them that just lights up our reward centers in the brain, and it just makes us want to keep eating more and more and more of them. So, and again, we tend to blame ourselves when that happens. And I think what we have to remember is it's not ours, it's the food. It's been specifically formulated to do that. But I think when we're thinking about snacking, it's thinking, can I move away from some of those ultra processed snack foods, and can I go for some of the more whole foods instead? You know, could I go for Greek yogurt and berries? Could I go for a small handful of nuts? You know, could I go for some peanut butter and oat cakes? You know, it's can I go for something that is going to drive my hunger, maybe less than some of these ultra processed options?
Yeah, that's really some fantastic advice, and you've probably seen lots of questions pop up for you in the chat. One that I'll pick up, and not just because I'm Irish, but because Tina asked it as well. What about potatoes?
Yeah, I mean, potatoes are, you know, potatoes are fine. They don't, they would be classed as a sort of starchy food, but there's nothing wrong with potatoes at all. You know, it's always, think about those in that quarter of your plate and try and have them with the skins on. And often it's what you do with them and what you put with them that's the relevant bit. But you can certainly include potatoes, and they are fine. It's just make sure you've got lots of veg with them, and make sure that there's some protein with them as well.
Not the half pound of butter and the salt and stuff.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Maybe not. What are your thoughts on supplements? Again, this has come up. Are there any supplements that you recommend? Do you think people should steer away from them?
I mean, the vitamin D, as I mentioned, I think primarily a food first approach, I think, is the best approach. there is obviously an awful lot of supplements out there on the market. The difficulty is that we don't have a lot of evidence for many of them in terms of their effectiveness. And I think it's very understandable that people want to take supplements because you're wanting, you know, a sort of the fastest way of dealing with how you're feeling. But I think all the evidence when we look at it is really that a food first approach is the best way.
Brilliant. That's really, really clear. Claire, Dr. Clare, I should say. Apologies. Any thoughts from your end? I know you've mentioned already the importance of bone and heart health. Are there any things that you've heard from Claire or Kate that really stand out that you'd emphasize just in terms of importance? Kate's brilliant point around we're living longer, but it has to be about, you know, our health span as well as lifespan.
Yes, so look, the menopause is a time of transition. We are changing, our bodies are changing, life is busy. I think I'd reiterate everything that everybody's said. I really like it. I say to patients what Kate has just talked about. If you're not moving, just start by 5 minutes, set an alarm for 5 minutes, you know, just do something. I think the importance of movement, the importance of appraising your diet. You know, I know Kate's got great advice on her website. Claire's got great advice on her website in conjunction with the doctor, who is me, who can help you with the sort of more medical aspects. But it's, as I said right at the beginning, it is seldom one quick fix in this. It really is really looking after yourself. And you do, you know, you might have swum through life at 90 miles an hour. And then you get to the menopause and you do have to start looking after yourself and taking time to look at how you can build in some exercise, some relaxation, to look at your diet, because I think sorting your diet out, it does take effort, you know, and in the same way that sorting exercise in conjunction with safe, evidence-based medical advice as to the best way to help manage your menopause symptoms would be my summary.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. And one of the questions that's come up, I'm just looking through, I know there was a question about changing testosterone levels and the impact that can have on energy. What are your thoughts on that, Claire? I know we're very focused on estrogen and the changes in that can bring in terms of symptoms.
Yeah, so the story is, so women's and men's testosterone both peak in your late 20s, except men's testosterone levels are 10 to 20 times higher those of women, and they slowly decrease with increasing years for men and women, and that decrease doesn't accelerate in the menopause transition. And so although testosterone is an important hormone for men and women, we don't really think it necessarily has a significant is a significant factor in contributing to that slower metabolism. Certainly, if you add testosterone back for women, there's no evidence that it does then either build muscle mass if you take it in the quantities that keep your own level below the upper end of normal for a woman. So it doesn't contribute to muscle mass as far as we know, similarly energy or cognitive function, but we do know that testosterone can help libido when we add it back. So if you measure all of our testosterones in the room this evening, the vast majority would have a really quite low testosterone, and that's fine. That is normal. That is what is meant to happen. And for some women that might have an effect and others it doesn't. So great question to ask, but I don't think we know, there's certainly no evidence to show that it's the factor in slowing metabolism. But there is so much that we don't know, can I just say. We only know what we know at the moment, and there are black holes of data and knowledge.
Yeah, well, there's a big gender data gap, isn't there, when it comes to women's health, not in the least around menopause, Claire, as we've discussed many times before. We've got just a couple of really relevant, important questions around what can trigger menopause and when you get it. So I'll just keep with you for a moment, Claire, on that. So great question here from Jamil. Is there a difference in symptoms or the impact of symptoms if you have an early menopause, so menopause 40 to 45?
Yeah, okay. So what we know is, so many women with a premature menopause, that's under the age of 40, don't have symptoms of the menopause. Their periods can just stop and don't get in symptoms of estrogen deficiency. Some do, some don't. If you go through an earlier menopause, I don't think we have any data to tell us that you're more likely to have symptoms or less likely from the age of 40, between the age of 40 and 45, which is an early menopause, except if you have a surgical menopause or a medical menopause, where in a surgical menopause, your ovaries are removed, either often cancer prevention, cancer treatment, management of endometriosis. If you take the ovaries away, you suddenly remove the main source of estrogen. And so whatever your age, your estrogen levels plummet. And so if you have a surgical menopause, often your symptoms are more severe and last for longer than a natural menopause. And there's similar data for a medical menopause, where your ovaries suddenly stop working, say due to radiotherapy or chemotherapy. So I don't think we've got the data to tell us there's different symptoms for women aged 40 to 45 necessarily, but how you have your menopause does have an impact on symptoms.
Thank you. And I've put a couple of links into articles that Clare has written about premature ovarian insufficiency and about the menopause transition, covering all of that as well. And then Clare, last question for you, and then I'll come back to Kate with some more questions on exercise. Last question for now, I should say. It's around really interesting question here from Tina. Thank you for the question, Tina. And can stress or bereavement bring about menopause and menopause symptoms? Tina was wondering that, and somebody else has commented that they wondered that too, because they feel that might have happened to them.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So there isn't particularly any evidence around this, but I have seen a handful of patients who've had a really horrible shock and sort of timed their menopause symptoms from that point. So a couple of points. So menopause symptoms do creep up on you, and I wonder sometimes then if what happens is you have a horrible shock and suddenly you're more aware. You might have another reason, like, for example, bereavement, to feel sad and unhappy. Bereavement can affect your sleep. It can affect your mood. Bereavement really has, it's really difficult to sort of stress the discombobulation that bereavement can put your body through for a period of time. And so probably that will heighten menopause symptoms. And so you may have had the odd symptom here and there and not really paid much attention before. And then bereavement makes you realize that, yes, absolutely, and it heightens those symptoms. From a biochemical point of view, stress can impact on ovarian function. It can affect the hormones in your brain that affect the driving of your ovaries. And so, for example, your periods can stop at times of great stress, but that's not necessarily putting you into the menopause. It's a temporary phenomenon. So really great question, and hopefully a few pointers there. But yes, I really hope that you're not bereaved and you are getting support, because it can really knock you for six, and add that to the menopause makes far more symptoms.
Yeah, it makes everything harder, doesn't it? Yes, and sorry, yes, Jane has asked, will the links that we've shared in the chat be shared post the event? They will through my Menopause Centre, so just make sure you're signed in to our newsletter, and we'll send them all out, including links to Kate and Clare's websites as well. They've got fantastic information there, and a link to more information about Kate's brilliant book as well. So Kate, just on exercise, you've shared a lot of your thoughts and your advice, and really important advice on motivation and how to do it. Could you just do just a recap for us though of the types of exercise that you think are most helpful? We'd have quite a few questions come up about yoga and about stretching, so we've got about 5 minutes left. So just quick headlines from you and your top tips and advice.
Of course, I'll try and keep it short. And I did notice that a couple of people had said that they've been lifting weights and they hadn't got the motivation and perhaps weren't noticing changes. Just quickly on that, And again, Claire, I know you'll agree, just make sure you're eating enough protein. Ideally 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight in order to really make those changes if you are lifting weights. So that's always just quite an important statistic, you know, if you are finding you're doing the weightlifting and it's not making a change. And then again, sorry, there were loads of people asking about creatine. And creatine is a naturally occurring compound which is found in the body, but there is so much research now behind it that for women, especially in menopause, it can be quite a game changer. Just on that, if you do want to take it, please make sure you've got no contraindications with any medications. Check it out, do your own research as well. Don't get capsule form up, that's got bulking agents in it. Go for the powdered form. 100% creatine monohydrate is the one that you need, and that will help with your athletic performance, can build muscle, can improve strength, and there is some suggestion that it can help with cognitive function and brain health. So those, I would say, for women who are advanced in their exercise journey, or, you know, or not even do add it, can give you a little bit of a tummy upset, perhaps if you take too much. So just be mindful with that as well. But I take it every day. And I believe that for me, it's been instrumental in helping me build muscle. But just kind of coming to the types of exercise as well, because again, when we talked about, you know, what time we should exercise, again, any form of exercise is brilliant. So yes, absolutely. Yoga, Pilates, bar, swimming, spin, walking, jogging, running, all of them are brilliant. I would say, and obviously body weight, you know, equally brilliant. I would say, however, that the one thing with lifting weights and starting to trying to lift weights and build that lean muscle, is that we need to overload our muscle in order to maintain it and to build it. And we can sort of plateau a lot of the time if we're not adding what we would call resistance in order to challenge that. You know, the benefits, I guess, of kind of lifting weights, and I know that's where I'm very, very biased, but it helps with your muscle mass, your bone density, it will support weight management, your heart health, your mental well-being, and it will protect your joints, improve your posture. It helps balance. The more muscle you have, the more muscle mass you have, can help balance your blood sugar levels. So again, we've already talked about how we go through this massive fluctuation through insulin sensitivity. The more muscle mass we have, the more able we are to balance our blood sugars. So, you know, all indications when we talk about exercise and menopause do point towards lifting weights, but equally it is important to find something you love. And as I say, yoga will help, Pilates. And again, when we talked about rest earlier, stretching. Absolutely. You know, we want to be stretching. We want to have that that movement alongside anything more intense that we are doing. That will help with recovery, that will lengthen the bones, it will strengthen the muscle. And again, I think, you know, I seeing some of the comments where people are like, you know, I'm losing the motivation with what I'm doing. Sometimes perhaps if you're doing too much of it, try something different. So if you're doing that weightlifting and you're a bit like, you know, one day just go and do a lovely yoga class and a Pilates class or whatever, because it can become such a lovely complement. And I think that that's the thing, not necessarily one way of exercise is always going to be the right way. You can find all these different ways that, you know, that keep you motivated and that kind of fill your cup. And I think, you know, we spent so long in lockdown, and I feel like perhaps the reason this cohort of women are quite confused about that is because we were shut off from the world. So we did so much online. And so, you know, it's then really hard to sort of put yourself out there, but go and join a class, you know, take your friends along, you know, bring your partners along with you as well, and kind of, you know, bond with them and do exercise there. And I think it's just bring everybody into it. Like there's, you know, the power of sharing and bringing people along the ride for the exercise. And equally, of course, you can come and join my app where we have brilliant exercise classes too. So there's a whole array, but strength training would be my ultimate drive for all people. I promise you. And I know that we're running out of time, but to the lady who talked about grief and bereavement, I will say that I was that person headed into menopause and lost my dad. And for me, weight training saved me, like the mental gain, because your brain and your body connect, right? You're there and you're like, can I lift this weight? Am I going to do it? And you're not thinking about, you know, that person that you've lost, or that person that you're caring for, or, you know, if you are doing the shopping and the cooking and the cleaning, that I find that lifting weights is just a true moment of self-care for myself. And equally, you may find that in other disciplines of exercise. For me, that's been weightlifting.
Thank you, Kate. That was really inspiring. Thank you. Claire, your top tips. You've given some fantastic nutrition and dietary advice. And what I love about it is it's really practical and doable. It doesn't feel like you've got to change your life. You've got to change your shopping list completely. But what would your parting advice be to our audience tonight?
I think don't undervalue small changes. You know, I think that we often do, and our brains often say to us, oh, that's not going to make a difference. But actually, that is how we build habits, by starting small. And I think if you are really stressed and you're exhausted and you're dealing with lots of symptoms and everything that life is throwing at you, to do a complete overhaul, it's not necessary, and it's overwhelming, and that's often why people start and then give up. And I suppose that's, to some extent, that can be the danger with kind of New Year's resolutions. So start small, and that would be a key point. And then I think the other thing would be about, don't be hard on yourself. You know, we tend to have quite a tough inner critic. And what we're really trying to do is sort of build up our kind of inner coach. You know, we can sort of, when things don't go right and we've had a bad day, we can talk to ourselves in quite a harsh way. And I think just bringing compassion to that and thinking, how would I coach somebody if they were trying to do this and that was someone in my family or a friend or something? So I think just giving ourselves a break, and, you know, as Kate said, it's about self-care, and giving the time and prioritizing us is really crucial. But start small.
That's lovely. Again, I love it, Claire. It's so practical and really meaningful, and just so kind as well. So, and Dr. Clare, your parting thoughts as we come into the last couple of minutes.
Yes, yeah. So I think just reiterating, don't blame yourself for menopause symptoms. Don't beat yourself up. Just learn about the menopause, understand the changes that are happening within your body. Look at my Menopause Centre and other sort of evidence-based websites. There's a lot of misinformation out there now. And then just go and talk to somebody about what you're experiencing. Obviously, from a medical point of view, talk to a healthcare professional. And then I think just remembering that exercise is important, looking at diet is important, getting the right medical advice for you is important. And don't beat yourself up, because it is difficult.
Fantastic. Great advice there. Don't beat yourself up. Don't underestimate small changes, and motion is lotion.
Motion is lotion.
I think that sums up the evening. It's fantastic. So all I say, so Kate, Dr. Clare, I know you've all had very busy days today, and you've very generously given up your time this evening for this evening's event. I think you can tell from all of the engagement and questions that we have, you've been absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And Aideen, back to you.
Oh, thanks so much. That was such a great event. So thanks to Helen, to Dr. Clare, to Kate, and to Claire for this evening. Amazing advice and amazing help for everyone. And of course, thanks to everyone who's joined us tonight too. You will get a link to the recording after the event. So feel free to rewatch or to share with friends. So good night, everyone. And thank you all once again for joining, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.